Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Thinking Like a Lawyer. My name is Catherine Rubino. I'm a senior editor at Above the Law, and today my co-host is Chris Williams, also of Above the Law. Hi, Chris.
Hello.
How you doing?
Pretty good. I guess I'll wait until we get into the small talk segment to
that's as good a transition as any. We don't have any sound effects. Once again, Joe Patrice is on family leave, new dad, so he won't be here, so we don't have any official sound effects. So, bum-ba-da, small talk.
Cool. Yeah. So, what did I do this weekend? I did not see Barbie. It's still on the list of things to do. But I did see
Real shame.
Shakespeare in the Park. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah. So there was
what play?
I think it was Two Gentlemen of Verona.
Oh, very nice.
Have you seen it?
No.
Okay,
I haven't left the house much.
Got you.
in the last couple of months.
It's a play by the Bard, and they took some liberties with it. One, it was a musical, and two, everyone was like dressed in like 70s clothing. So there was like one character who had like a white tux and a black shirt, like he was fresh out of Boogie Nights. You know, we were doing like the thieves and vows. And it was fun.
Or Saturday Night Fever, the actual movie from the 70s that it was referencing.
Yes. But yeah, it was nice. Got some recuperative sleep in, which is the good kind, and not just the, I got 20 minutes before I got to do the next thing, sleep. And in a bit of nerddom, it was Poliwag Community Day. So for any Pokemon Go players out there, I got a rank 12 Poliwrath. So if you see me beating ass, it was from this weekend.
Wow.
So.
That really feels like a blast from the past. I definitely, when it first was released, was all into it. I can remember seeing yeah, for sure. I mean, I was a person in 2012 or whatever it was released. I can remember sitting in the ATL. Yeah, for sure.
Oh my God.
I can remember sitting in the ATL offices and David Ladd, our former coworker, Joe, and I all being like, if we go into the kitchen, we can catch a whatever. I don't even remember what it was. Some carp, maybe a magic carp. Is that a thing? I feel like that's a thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I definitely played for a minute, but I don't know. You have to go places to play that game. When I play games on my phone, I want to just kind of dissociate for a minute or two and just sit down. And I think that if you could, I would get those. What were those things when the things would come to you?
Oh, the roars? The incense.
Yeah. And then that was fun. That was fun. I can remember definitely like playing in cabs as I was like, going from places in the city and be like, oh, there's one on that corner. If we stop at that light, I can get it. In like the laziest version ever. I think is the opposite of what they intend with that game. But, here we are.
That's cool. Yeah, it was, I feel like everybody from like 8-year-olds to 86-year-old clan members played that. Like it was the closest thing to world peace.
It was a real vibe for a minute. Like I remember being on like a family vacation and like my little cousins playing it and, being like, oh, well, I'll go take a walk to the beach so that we can all catch some, I don't know, whatevers. Mm-hmm. In my defense, and I don't know any of these names, I was never particularly into Pokemon pre the game. It wasn't it wasn't like a property that I was already very familiar with. Unlike something like Barbie, for example, where I was like, peaches and cream, Barbie, date at night, Barbie. That's exciting. A little different, but yeah.
Yeah, what about you?
Oh, what did I do? I went to my godmother's 70th birthday party. It was a surprise. I did not know it was a surprise party until the day of. So I'm just very glad that I didn't mess anything up. So, points for me, but I was unaware it was a surprise party, but it was good. It was fun. It was my daughter's first party she's ever been to. Aww. So that was a weird thing. But, when you have a newborn baby, you become the default kind of center of attention in a lot of ways. And a lot of people come over and want to see you, want to touch the baby, want to hold the baby. We got a fair dose of germs and now we're home. Well, I think that might be all for small talk. Now we can start on our first story. The first story we are going to talk about this week is actually in the U.S. versus Hunter Biden case, although it's not about Hunter Biden. It's actually a Biglaw story, but it was revealed that there was an order to show cause why Latham and Watkins, who is representing Hunter Biden, should not be sanctioned. And when you go into the docket, it turns out the court believes that an attorney or a staff member at Latham and Watkins misrepresented who they worked for when they called the court. Apparently, there was a document filed by an amicus, and there was some information in the brief that the attorneys at Latham and wanted either redacted or taken off of the public docket. And when they had somebody call on behalf of the firm to have that information redacted, according to the court, that person said that they were working with the party that filed the amicus brief, not somebody who was representing Hunter Biden. Latham very strongly objects or denies this claim. And I think the more I kind of dug into it and read the underlying documents, I have to say that Latham's story definitely passes the smell test. It wasn't an attorney who was working on the case. It is somebody who was barred in New York, but somebody who works kind of in their litigation services, kind of managing attorney, doing the administrative stuff for not just this case, kind of a bunch of cases. They don't know any of the substance of the case. And indeed, when they called, and whatever party they spoke to had a couple of questions about the specifics of the information they wanted redacted, and the person who the managing attorney called was like, "Oh, I don't know. I have to talk to the actual attorneys. I don't know the answer because I don't know the substance of the case." Additionally, as they note in their letter, that the caller ID generally reflects that it's from Latham when they call places. So it seems like it would be highly unlikely that they would try to pull one over. And again, this is somebody, the litigation services, the staff member, is somebody who's worked at the firm for 18 years. And no one works at a firm like this for 18 years, has no kind of personal interaction on the case, is not actually working on the substance of the case, and decides to throw their entire career away because of what? That that this is some kind of a lie that they think would benefit their client, that they don't even represent them directly, right? They work for a company, they work for a firm that represents them. This is somebody, who's, spent a lot of years doing this kind of very technical work. It just seems it would be shocking to me if there was some kind of actual ill intent as opposed to some sort of a just miscommunication. And, the Latham letters talks about how somebody else from the clerk's office called back the Latham staff person, and they think that somehow in that, there's some sort of miscommunication as to who the caller was, and that's kind of where it happened. And since then, I've looked back at the docket, and there are no sanctions for Latham, but there is an order that the judge put in saying that if anybody has any issues with anything on the docket, they have to speak to the clerk, not to the clerk's office generally, but to the judge in the judge's office. So to kind of try to minimize these issues. But it seems unlikely that this kind of a professional was doing something deliberately untoward. But because it's the Hunter Biden case,
of course,
and that is like some sort of magic talisman for the far right, say Hunter Biden 3 times in the mirror and, Bloody Mary comes or something. It feels bad that this became a bigger story than it probably needed to be because of that.
Yeah. If it was anyone who wasn't Hunter Biden or Hillary Clinton, it would be like a non-issue.
Mm-hmm. We wouldn't even notice if it happened, even if the judge did, think some sort of similar malfeasance was going on, we wouldn't even know about it because no one's following every docket that closely.
Right.
That when a misunderstanding happens. And I don't know, maybe it's my own personal set of experiences, but when I worked at a big law firm and working with the managing attorney or litigation services offices, those are always the people that know their shit the best, right? Those are the ones that make sure that you're not missing your deadlines. They're the ones that are counting the days on the calendar to let you know that, this is, they send these, automated emails like, this is due on this day, that kind of, stuff. These are people who really know their P's and Q's, and they're kind of, that's what their job is, not the substance of the law. Their job is to make sure that you're filing your briefs on the right paper and that you have the blue cover because you're filing in this court or it's in this font because this judge's local rules say that it has to be in point 12 or whatever. So that's certainly been my experience with these kinds of litigation services offices. And so that's my take.
It's one of those things where people sometimes they just want to make more things out of than it needs to be.
Oh, for sure. And, certainly, listen, at Above the Law, we get a lot of unsolicited reader emails. A lot of them are wonderful. And, if you have any tips about things that are going on in the legal world, you should feel free to reach out to us at tips@abovethelaw.com. Little plug there. But, we get a lot of people who read our stories who have opinions. So we get a lot of kind of unsolicited responses to our work. And this one, pulled out a lot of the crazies just who have some like Hunter Biden Google alert on their phone saying, this is obviously the worst thing that they could have done. I was like, how? Why? I mean, this is even if it was somehow deliberate, which I don't think that that's what happened. It's my opinion that that's not what happened. But regardless, it was easily discoverable, right? Like besides the caller ID literally says the name of the firm. It would take about 3 seconds for them to contact the actual attorney's office, for the people who actually filed the amicus brief to find out whether or not where this person works. This is not some sort of like deep fake going on here. This is at best, I think, an honest mistake. And I don't know which side necessarily the mistake was on, but man, people are like, this is obviously the worst thing. And this is Hunter Biden trying to get away. Oh, come now, people.
Oh, you don't understand. It looks like an honest mistake because it's so corrupt.
Hey, Guy, what's up?
Just having some lunch, Conrad.
Hey, Guy, do you see that billboard out there?
Oh, you mean that guy out there in the gray suit?
Yeah, the gray suit guy.
Order up. There's all those beautiful, rich, leather-bound books in the background.
That is exactly the one. That's J.D. McGuffin at law. He'll fight for you!
I bet you he has got so many years of experience.
Like decades and decades. And I bet he even went to a law school.
Are you a lawyer? Do you suffer from dull marketing and a lack of positioning in a crowded legal marketplace? Sit down with Guy and Conrad for Lunch Hour Legal Marketing on the Legal Talk Network. Available wherever podcasts are found.
So you wrote a story about some shenanigans in Alabama.
God bless Alabama. No one else will. But yeah, it's a...
And you're not talking about their football team.
No, they're. But yeah, so there were, I guess this is some Supreme Court gerrymandering shenanigans. There was a recent case where, kind of surprisingly, the Supreme Court shot down the independent state legislator theory that would let...
Correct. Well, I mean, that's how crazy the independent state legislator theory was. Yeah, it was
even
so
the
crazy.
Supreme Court.
This Supreme Court was like, nah.
Yeah. Even unreasonable minds differed in this instance. They were like, okay, we're not going to go that far. And then good old Alabama, they were like, oh, we know our people better than, federal courts, what have you. And that's just pretty language for we don't want to let black people vote. So that's what happened. Alabama did in Alabama. And it's a weird thing because, there are people that talk about, separation of powers issues. For example, does Congress have the authority to impose an ethical code of conduct on the Supreme Court? Interesting questions. But this is just straight up not paying attention or not listening to the authorities that be. And it's just a weird situation to deal with from the law and order party. So the Alabama legislature basically just has a map of that cuts out what's supposed to be a second district of black voters.
Right, because they were specifically mandated to have at least 2 districts that were predominantly black.
Right. Just because of demographics and, equity in voting, dumb stuff, but still, just the bedrock of,
I think
democracy.
The order said that it required 2 districts in which black voters either compromise a voting age majority or something quite close to it.
Right.
And Alabama was like, nah, we're just gonna make a map and it's only gonna have one.
And like,
There's
I think the vibe was very much be thankful you have one.
It is interesting too. This kind of, defiance of court orders in this way is interesting, kind of how legal academia has been responding to. We also wrote some stories this week about that. A Notre Dame law professor, Derek Muller, tweeted out that he couldn't see how Alabama's maps defied the court's order, which, apparently counting a 2 is a rough one here. And of course, he's a expert in election law.
And like, I think that there is something to say about like math being difficult. Like, I think Bertrand Russell spent like 2 books in like Principia Mathematica trying to prove that 1 + 1 = 2. But this wasn't like a complex set theory argument. This was a guy who was like, nah, you could have done the fingers test for this. Just like one.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe the map was. Listen, there's no justification. He's since deleted the tweet after like a bunch of other people on Twitter. I guess are we calling it? We're still calling it Twitter, right? We're not calling it X.
We're not going to make fetch happen.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the reference. Yeah, a bunch of people piled on. We're like, it's too hard. Pay attention, Notre Dame law students. You have an expert who can't
you
manage
trust
the
this
basics.
person to calculate your grades? Like, if Johnny has 1 apple, Johnny has 1 more apple.
But so he deleted the tweet with no explanation, sort of what his thinking was there. But it seems a lot like he got called out and then all of a sudden, deleted the tweet. But don't worry, people have taken screenshots, so it lives for forever.
Yeah.
It's interesting too because you called sort of the GOP the party of law and order, and they're the ones who are going around defying court orders. But, they're not the only ones who are taking that as the political path forward. Mark Tushnet, a Harvard law professor, wrote an open letter to Joe Biden, along with some political scientists, saying that they thought that what Biden should do is just ignore the Supreme Court because they're unpopular and their opinions do not reflect the majority of what the country thinks about all these issues. Therefore, we should not be beholden to them.
What were your thoughts on it?
I mean, listen, it's very tempting to say like this Supreme Court is ridiculous, but that is a wildly dangerous move in my estimation. The whole point of the court was that they were supposed to protect the minority against the tyranny of the majority, right? And if the only thing that matters, according to this theory, this kind of popular constitutionalism, is what does the majority think, well, then there's no protections, right? And right now, liberal ideals might benefit from this kind of worldview, but I don't think that historically that was true, and I don't think that that's a good path forward. I think that that's just a way to break the system. Now, query, is the system so broken that it doesn't matter? Maybe, but if we ever going to kind of salvage a workable constitutional system, we're going to need a court. And maybe there are reforms that we can have, but something to kind of protect against the tyranny of the majority seems like a good idea. There's a purpose for that, I think.
Yeah, I feel like I treaded similar waters, especially around the overturning of Roe. And also with the Bruin, the gun decision, there were a bunch of constitutional sheriffs that were like, we will abide by this law. We won't abide by this law. And it's just interesting to see those places where people decide if using discretion is the proper thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, the only way the system actually works is if you listen to the court, regardless of whether or not you enjoy the results of the court. Yeah. And I think it's, listen, the people who are really mad, the only people really who are talking about this Tushnet open letter are far right sources being like, we told you the liberals were terrible. Look what they're saying we should do with the Supreme Court. Don't worry, they're utterly silent when it comes to what the Alabama is actually doing in respect to listening to the Supreme Court.
Can you believe they're doing the things we're doing?
Precisely. So our last story, our colleague Stacy Zaretsky wrote, and it's about how wildly out of touch incoming law students are.
Oh, God.
There was a new study by the University of Illinois College of Law professor Jennifer Robinholt and Illinois law graduate Sam Barter talking about, studying the opinions of incoming law students and how well they think that they're going to do in law school. They all think they're going to do fucking great.
Yeah. And this is another one of those things where it's like if Johnny has two apples, but it's harder to see water when you're a fish, you know? Because like I was in a similar boat. I thought, okay, I was top of my class. I'm gonna be top of my class here, but then I get that and I'm like, oh, everybody was top of their class where they were.
Exactly.
That's not enough.
Yeah, something I think it was 95% of incoming law students think that they're going to be in the top 50%. That is not how math works. Yeah. That's going to be like the sub theme of this.
If it is how the curves work, there should be some ABA issues.
Yeah. You can't all be in the top. And I think that, and I've spent some time at my years at Above the Law talking to potential law students and law students who have options about where they're thinking about what law schools to attend. And I always refer them to Law School Transparency. It's a website that kind of is an amalgamation of all the different data points that we have of law schools. And I always tell them to look at how many people at the law school when they graduate, how many people are getting jobs? What kind of jobs are they getting? Are those the jobs that you want? And, people tell me, oh, yeah, 10%, I want to be a big law attorney. Cool. Law school I want to go to, or I think I've gotten into more accurately, about 10% of people go to big law. I'm like, well, those aren't great odds. Mm-hmm. Maybe you should consider, or 2% or, whatever. Like, well, I'll be one of the ones that do it. I'm like, how much of this class do you thinks they're going to be the ones?
Yeah.
And if you didn't have the grades to get into the law schools where, 90% are going to big law, what makes you think then that now you're going to be in that top percentage that's going to be able to get that job that, you say you want? Yeah. I think that, and we see the same thing in law firm life too, when people are looking at what law firms to go to and they look at whether or not everyone's getting bonuses or what the standard is for getting bonuses at the firms that they're looking at. And, they say, well, I'm always going to be able to bill my hours. Everyone thinks they're going to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. But is everyone actually getting that bonus? If not, then you should take it as a very real, or you will not necessarily have control over whether or not you are the one who's billing those hours or doing those things.
I think this thing can also factor into people that get conditional full rides. Because it's like, they'll be like, oh, I remember one of the schools I got into, I had a full ride if I could maintain a particular GPA. Mm-hmm. But then I was like, if everyone is getting this and the curve is a thing, there will be people that necessarily end up paying when they thought they had a free ride. So
that's a lot of stress. It's not just you don't get to do what you want to do. It's like all of a sudden you got a bill that's due at the end. Yeah. And you didn't think you had a bill.
Which I guess is some good motivation to read, but
I certainly, all these things are good reasons to be diligent at the task that you're doing. But I think that what these numbers really show is that a lot of people who are going to law school, those are a self-selected group, right? That's not the average human that exists. This is a group of people that already have taken a very difficult exam to prove that they want to, which is a heartache. It costs money to do the application process. It's more, there's a test, there's essays, there's all this other stuff. They've already kind of self-selected into this motivated group of folks. They already want the kind of job that being a lawyer is, that they know requires time and research and all these other kind of, built in. So this is a self-selected, highly motivated group of individuals. Now, that's why I think that's also part of why they all think that they're the ones that are going to be in the top percentage. But it's worth noting that, or remembering, for if you have a wannabe law student in your life, you may really think that you are the one that is going to be the very top, but everyone thinks that. Mm-hmm. Everyone. I think that what you were saying about, You don't notice the kind of temperature going up when you're in the middle of it is very accurate.
And once you're in law school, it's weird. And this is one of those things where it's like it's hard to know who has what grades. Even the person that you think is the laziest person in the group still got there. So it's like they're, that's one of the things about being in a peer group. It's like, sure, you can find ways to differentiate yourself, but also it's like that's your cohort.
Listen, there are plenty of there are law schools where it doesn't matter. You graduated and, you're not failing. If you're going to a T14 school and, you've got grades, good job. You're probably doing all right unless you want, but you're doing all right. You're going to get a job. Are you necessarily going to get that clerkship that you wanted? No. There's, you think that you're going to be at the top, but that doesn't always make it true. Want and reality are often quite different.
I thought you were going for a Thanos quote. I think there's a point where he's like, reality is often disappointing. So
yes, I should have.
I'm sure they can edit that in, just change my voice a little. Don't ever know.
Reality is quite disappointing. There you go. All right. Well, it looks like we are winding down here. Any other thoughts on the summer as it's developed thus far, Chris?
Cliche, but the weather's really nice.
You and I have different definitions of nice, but I appreciate that.
I mean, and it also could be enough of a geographical difference where there's like some, difference. But my sky is great. I don't know about yours.
Listen, at the moment, yes, but we've just gotten off of some pretty brutally hot weather, which I did not enjoy.
No, here's the thing.
And lots of rain.
Different. Here's what might be different. The heat wave was cool for me because I have air conditioning. I didn't leave the house, so that helps.
Sure. In my house, I wear a sweater, but outside feels awful.
Yes.
All right. Well, that is a fair point. But thanks to everyone for listening. You should be reading what the stories that we talk about on abovethelaw.com. You can find me on the socials at Catherine1. Chris is at Rights for Rent. You should check out the other podcasts on the Legal Talk Network. And I host a podcast about diversity in the law called The Jabot. I think that's all the things that Joe usually says at the end that I try to make fun of him for. But Joe will be back shortly for those of you who missed the dulcet tones of his quite distinctive voice. See y'all next week.
See you next week.
If you're a lawyer running a solo or small firm and you're looking for other lawyers to talk through issues you're currently facing in your practice, join the Unbillable Hours Community Roundtable, a free virtual event on the third Thursday of every month. Lawyers from all over the country come together and meet with me, lawyer and law firm management consultant Christopher T. Anderson, to discuss best practices on topics such as marketing, client acquisition, hiring and firing, and time management. The conversation is free to join, but requires a simple reservation. The link to RSVP can be found on the Unbillable Hour page at LegalTalkNetwork.com. We'll see you there.